Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back once again to another episode of the Truth Defender podcast. We are coming to you from the greatest country in the world, the great state of Texas, deep in the heart of the Lone Star State, Dallas, Texas, more specifically. If you guys aren't already a subscriber, please consider hitting that subscribe button for us, as well as the like button. That'll help us out with the algorithms as well. Also, don't forget to hit that bell icon so you guys get notified every time we go live or post a new video, which we're going to be doing a lot more here next couple of weeks. We got about 4 or 5 interviews, I believe, coming up. So those are going to be scheduled and put up, and we'll be seeing you guys live as well. If you guys are on the go and you want to check us out, you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio and Amazon Music at Truth Defender Podcast. If you guys really enjoy what we do here on the show and you feel like sharing us with a friend or colleague or somebody, maybe not somebody at work, but anybody else, go ahead and share that link to our show as well, whether that be YouTube or anything else. If you have any questions for myself or a guest, as well as guest or topic recommendations, as always, you can shoot us an email at thetruthDefender1776 at gmail.com. Today we're going to be speaking with an author as well, Mr. Matthew Gilman. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, it's been a few years. That's been more than a few years, actually. The journalist that was killed, and everybody said that he was like an accident, right? Michael Hastings. So I remember hearing the story on the news a lot, and it was a big thing at the time. But it was kind of swept under the rug as an accident. Nothing really to look at, nothing to see here. Everybody move along, right? But we all kind of knew at the time, at least I did, and kind of the circles that we all run in, that there was more to the story. But we never really got any kind of answers for anything. Don't think we ever really will, which is unfortunate. But we are going to be plugging away here and trying to see if we can kind of piece things together. So I'll go ahead and bring in Mr. Gilman so that way he can introduce himself and then, kind of let you guys know what's going on. So without further ado, Mr. Gilman, how you doing, sir?
I am doing good. How are you?
Not too bad. I really appreciate you coming on tonight. So we're going to be diving into your latest book, so the latest book is The Last Journalist, The Life and Times of Michael Hastings, right? But you got a new one coming out on the 31st. Can you kind of go into detail a little bit, or maybe not too much? I don't want to give it away, but what that latest book's going to be about and where they can go ahead and pick that up when it comes out.
The new book is A Crash in the Night, The Assassination of Duncan Lump. There is a lot of stuff that happened in 2020, but back in March of 2020, there was a raid on a house. It was around the same time Breonna Taylor had her apartment raided by the police, and she was killed. And a similar thing happened to Duncan Lump. The only difference was that people still talk about Breonna Taylor, and Duncan Lump was just kind of forgotten. He didn't really fit the narrative of what was going on that year, if you know what I mean. And anyways, he came up because of a FBI leaked memo earlier this year. Actually, it was a couple months ago, where his name was listed as one of the topics that if people are discussing this guy, that you might be a terrorist. So I recognized the name, couldn't really put my finger on like how I knew it. So I started doing a little bit of research and realized that there was a story there, and just kept plugging along, and there was a lot of information available, and a lot of new information was coming out too. Interviews with his girlfriend, reports that were released by the sheriff's department, and so I was able to piece a lot together from the information that was available, and I really wanted to put together a better narrative as to what exactly happened that night and what led up to it.
Sure. Yeah. it's kind of a weird. Um, Obviously, we all kind of know what was happening and how spicy things were at the time of like George Floyd and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of weird, like people kind of fall through the cracks, as there was other cases and such that were happening at the time, and we don't really hear about anything else besides what was like on the news at the time, which is unfortunate, but um, it kind of doesn't fit what they were going for at the time. So that's unfortunate, but yeah. So it's now. So we're gonna come back around here. So when did the last book come out? So that'll be The Last Journalist: The Life and Times of Michael Hastings.
That came out earlier this year. I recorded a couple of interviews for that as well, but they haven't been released yet. And I've been trying to plug it, and then I just kind of went on to the next project. And unfortunately, it just seems like this is a story that people, it's almost like people are meant to forget it, but
Sure.
it comes up occasionally on podcasts like Joe Rogan, and Tim Pool mentioned it a couple weeks back on his show. And uh, when I went to research this book, I noticed that a lot of his previous Hastings articles were like slowly disappearing online. Had to go to eBay and start finding specific copies of Rolling Stone and Newsweek in order to even get his articles. The internet is not forever, and
Right.
uh, I'm quickly learning that with one of my current projects that I'm working on, that there's just stuff that has completely disappeared unless somebody bothered to print it out back in the day and stash it away.
Sure.
Uh, but with Hastings, there's still a lot that's available. I was really surprised. The original footage of the car accident was available. A lot of his interviews. And he did write 3 books, 4 books technically. One is only available in ebook format, and that was his Panic 2012, when he covered the Obama reelection campaign.
Right.
And everybody refused to put it in print, just because Obama did win, and he didn't put the guy in a very favorable light. So um, uh,
Yeah.
he was a guy that definitely, he had a grudge, very understandable grudge. I don't know where you want me to start with his story, but he was definitely somebody that had a very quick change of view when it came to government and how it functioned.
Sure. So yeah. So I mean, I guess we can kind of start a little bit about where actually Hastings kind of rose through and where he came from. But I guess so. This is one of the things that I always try to not try to start off with, but it kind of sets a little picture of what, for me personally, where I'm going to be kind of heading down the road. So I would ask, do you or did you ever think in the past, prior to to kind of like investigating what happened, did you ever think that he was part of the whole like Clinton body count? Did that ever kind of cross your mind?
I joke about that in the book because he did cover Hillary Clinton running in 2008, and obviously she didn't get the nomination.
Right.
He covered a few people: Mike Huckabee, Hillary Clinton, everybody except for Obama. Nobody anticipated that Obama was going to be the front runner for that
Right.
election. And so when he covered Hillary, um, he liked Mike Huckabee, but as for Hillary, he started off by saying that she was kind of that cool mom in
Mm.
high school. You go to your friend's house, and she's the one that didn't even want to hang out with the friend, you want to hang out with her. But that quickly changed because her campaign, the people that ran it, were very aggressive towards journalists. They made no accommodations for the people covering the campaign. They had insane requests, like wanting to read the articles that they were writing before they were published. They would put specifications as to what could be in it and what couldn't be.
Right.
There's one point where they were covering a debate, and he was in the bathroom with a laptop on top of the urinal trying to type up his story as the debate was happening because they weren't allowed in the area because there was no planning ahead of time for where her journalists were going to be. And he said that by the end of it, there was a bunch of comments, racist comments that she made about Obama at the time, and that really killed his idea as to who she was. He really wanted to get off the campaign at that point, and he stated, it's not an exact quote. I'm trying to remember what he said, but he basically said that they were the biggest bunch of a-holes on the campaign trail that he ever came across. And that was all in print. So
Right.
if she held a grudge,
Oh
I
yeah,
can think
she
of
definitely
where,
did.
yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah. It's weird. It's kind of like obviously Hillary was like the main front runner in everybody's eyes at the time. When Obama had won the presidency, I was see when did he was 8 and 12, so I was in the military at the time, and I didn't know who Obama was like at all. I didn't know where he came from. I had never heard of him, like what he was about. But all of a sudden, he was just like our commander in chief and imposing all these crazy like laws and like things that we had to abide by. I guess like they were like first contact rules like of engagement that we had to go by like overseas in Afghanistan. Some crazy ones that we were just like, what's going on? Like you couldn't have your rifle loaded and you couldn't have the magazine and the thing and like, you couldn't have it charged and couldn't shoot anybody unless you were shot at first. It was just like all these crazy things, and I was just like, who is this guy? Like those when that was happening, like when he first became president, I had no idea who he was. It was crazy how he just kind of like appeared out of nowhere, and all of a sudden he was our president, and shit just rolled downhill from there. But like, yeah, I mean, I can only imagine the kind of things that, or like the kind of threats that he was receiving, not just from the Obama campaign, but specifically from Hillary Clinton, and all the weird and spiteful stories you hear from her about people that are like in the Secret Service that they would get shit thrown at them and they would get cussed at and all kinds of crazy things. I mean, I have no doubt that any of that was true. Like, I can only imagine somebody that's actively going after her, what kind of crap they get thrown at them. So it's pretty wild. Yeah, but so I guess we can kind of start, from the beginning and just kind of how he ended up, I guess, cutting his teeth as far as a reporter. I know you said that he was like overseas and he was actually covering like war zones and
Hmm.
stuff like that. So I guess we can kind of like start from the beginning a little bit and just kind of roll into how he actually ended up covering the elections at that time.
Yeah, the elections was really that was kind of like a in between phase for him. He started out at Newsweek and quickly realized that the audience they had there wasn't really fit for his style. He would turn in these pieces and then he would open the magazine later to find out that all the things that he thought was interesting were completely cut out. It was just very
Mm.
dry and generic. So he started requesting to go over to Iraq, and they spent a year. Newsweek did having him go through all this training and stuff for preparing him to go into a war zone. And lo and behold, he's being sent over. But 2 or 3 days before he's supposed to go overseas, he meets this girl, Annie Parmovich, and they start seeing each other. He goes over to Iraq. He only goes over there for short stints, and then he comes back to the states. And then, as they started seeing each other, she started to get jobs to where she's going over to Iraq, and that way they could still be together while they're both doing their jobs. He writes about this in "I Lost My Love in Baghdad," and he had been going over there from 2003 to 2007. And so Annie goes over there. She's working for the Republican, I forget the name of it. It was something dealing with the Republican Party. And then she ends up getting hired by the DNC, and her job is to help organize the new government that's going to be taking control of Iraq. Um, Unfortunately, the organization that she got the job for was very unorganized. They were not familiar with Iraq, or specifically Baghdad in general. Um, she goes into this bad neighborhood where everybody in the green zone knew that you just don't go there. But she's supposed to meet with these people. She has the meeting, and as she's leaving the meeting and the convoy comes under attack, and they believe that it was initially supposed to be a kidnapping,
Right.
but it quickly turned into her car was hit by several hundred rounds of bullets. The one of the bodyguards broke the seat to get into the back seat to cover her. The driver got out of the car and abandoned them at the scene. There was speculation he might have been involved in it. They couldn't get the car open, and so the people trying to get her out threw grenades under the car, igniting the gas tank, and she ended up burning alive in the vehicle. Hastings was over there at the time that this happened, and there's some obvious regret that he had. He talks about it in the book, um, wishing that he had died with her, that he would have been the one that would have been protecting her at that time. Um, he ended up flying back with the body, and this was in cargo planes where there were several other coffins that were being shipped back to the States, and he never ended up stepping foot in Iraq ever again. He took some time off after that and ended up writing his book, and that was, according to his family, that was like his way uh, of therapy through the event, trying to make some sense of it. But there was a time period where he was basically investigating as to how this happened, because he had spent 2 years at that point in Iraq, and he couldn't for the life of him figure out how they didn't know the neighborhood was bad, how they didn't plan for the possibility of an attempted kidnapping,
Right.
why there wasn't more security. He had all these questions that just didn't make sense. So uh, he was definitely trying to blame or point the finger at somebody while also feeling guilty about this happening. They had just been, um, prior to this, maybe a week or two beforehand, talking about he was going to get her a ring and they were going to get engaged and um, end up getting married. Um, but none of that ended up happening. There's also a small controversy about when he got the book deal. It was a $500,000 up front, so there was people that were making comments about how he was profiting on the death of his fiance, and
Right.
so it's just all this guilt compounded over and over again at this one event. And covering the 2008 election was, I think it was just one of those busy jobs that um, kept him from thinking about it. You're constantly on the road, you're constantly moving. He's got to fill out all these reports all the time, and that was one way to move past it.
Yeah. No, it's rough. I mean, as as far as being, I guess one of the only other kind of occupations that's extremely dangerous, like being like an investigative reporter. When it comes to the war, and like I would see reporters embedded like overseas and like different battalions and like doing stories, and they would get sent out with other groups and freaking convoys and stuff, and like that's one job that, as far as being like in war, I would never just want to be in a war zone without a weapon to protect myself. That's got to be like the most helpless feeling like ever. Even when you're in like a war zone and you have a weapon, that's still like one of like the shittier jobs out there. But to be a reporter out there and like not have any kind of weapon, to actually protect yourself and stuff, like you're just like a sitting duck, and like you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants and at the whims of like other soldiers or like other security details that are out there. But yeah, I mean, it's rough. I mean, him being out there, and I could definitely see why he would feel guilty. They obviously probably had a conversation at one point where they were kind of thinking about, if she should go out there so they could spend more time together. And he probably kind of was like, yeah, you should come, we can see each other more often. And then this ends up happening. So I'm sure he felt like shit afterwards, but it's definitely like a rough pill to swallow. But yeah, it's kind of a weird thing also that you were speaking about, that, he was kind of shining a little bit of light on Obama as far as, stories that he was writing about him and stuff like that. I guess one of like the bigger ones was as far as like the illegal wiretaps on American journalists. Was that kind of like one of like the bigger kind of stories that he was following, or how did that whole thing work out?
He was kind of at the forefront for that. He called it the war on journalism. This came after his piece in Rolling Stone. He was doing a series of articles. One was Why Democrats Love to Spy on Americans.
Mm.
Uh, so 2013, that was the beginning of Edward Snowden. His leaks were coming out. You already had Chelsea Manning, uh, the leaks that he or she, depending on at the time,
Who you're
that
talking-
the stuff that he revealed to the public. Uh, but there was also, uh, because of the leaks, the DOJ and the NSA were working together to do warrantless wiretaps on journalists. And it was specifically the journalists that either received some of the information that was being leaked, or people that they suspected were going to receive it. All of this was illegal at the time, uh, but information came out, and Hastings was very vocal about it. Uh, at the time that he died, he was working on a profile piece on John Brennan, and John Brennan had just been brought into the CIA, but come to find out, he was also behind the warrantless wiretaps that were happening at the DOJ. Uh, the guy has a really sketchy past. Just coming into being the head of the CIA, there was the question of where all this was going to be heading, um, and apparently Hastings had come across some information that he thought was going to be groundbreaking. We don't know if it was going to be about John Brennan or if it was about something else. He sent emails out to friends and colleagues saying that he's onto a big story, and this was during his time that he was working on the profile piece. Uh, but uh, there was other information that came out afterwards, after Hastings died. One of them was that John Brennan was behind arming Al Qaeda in Syria. There was also the creation of ISIS that was happening around that time. So there was a lot of things that Brennan was behind that were very, very sketchy, that ended up being revealed later, anyways. Uh, so it's unknown if the profile piece had anything to do with his death or not, but the timing of it, the fact that the FBI was investigating Hastings at the time,
Right.
the fact that they tried to hide that, and even with a FOIA request that was uh, filed after Hastings' death to see if there was any paperwork or files that were being kept on Hastings. Even the file that was released was very questionable. It just, when I was looking at it, it seemed to be very slapped together. It didn't make any sense. There really wasn't anything to it except for a Rolling Stone piece that he had written prior, about a defector in Afghanistan, There were some comments in the comments section for this article that were printed off, and then there was a little note at the end that was like, Hastings was behind the firing of Stanley McChrystal, and it's like, you started a file for this article that nobody really remembers, but then you make this comment about how he was involved in the firing of this highly regarded and respected general who had just taken over in Afghanistan.
Right.
Uh, so, in my opinion, it was not the file, and it was to really hide the fact that the FBI was investigating a journalist, which, as we know now, they're in the habit of doing. They've got files on all kinds of people. They probably have one on me. So
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, there's lists for everything nowadays, and I guarantee you, a lot of people are on a lot of different lists right now. It's pretty scary. I mean, they can keep tabs on you. So I guess like having worked in, so I have to be careful with my words here. So being in the military and having a secret clearance, working with alphabet boys overseas and like dark black sites and stuff like that. So you'd be surprised on how well they can keep track of people that are like in country, people that are not in the country anymore, people that are leaving, who's coming in. It's just a phone call or maybe like an email away for some of these people. Like they can have you on any kind of list and they can follow you no matter what you're doing. And it's just like a big freaking database. Whenever they hit on certain words or like certain context for whatever kind of things that you're looking into, and you're just on somebody's radar now, and they're just there and they just follow you as long as they want. It's real easy. Like it's real easy. I've seen a little bit of it firsthand, but it's not as far as like spying on people and stuff. But I've seen how they can put you on a list and they can track, what you're doing and like where to find you and stuff like that. It's definitely scarier.
yeah,
That's that to me is a lot scarier than like some freaking guy coming up to you like in a back alley or something, because they're watching you like 24/7. They know what you're doing. Even when you think you're asleep, you better turn off that freaking webcam in your room. You better do some kind of stuff because they're watching you. They're even watching on your phone too. So it's
hmm
not it's not fun, but especially when like he's looking into stories and stuff about Obama, obviously, all the spying on the journalists. Obviously, he's looking into stuff about the kill list as well of like
hmm
terrorists, such. Obviously, he's snooping around into a lot of things that he shouldn't be, and he's getting a lot closer to information. Sticking his nose where he shouldn't be. But like, so that's kind of like when it was revealed that those 20 journalists for the Associated Press had their like phone subpoenaed, right, at
hmm
that time. But like Edward Snowden, obviously, who was famous for the NSA leaks, said that the DOJ already had that information, meaning like it was illegal that they had that information. So it's like there's people above the law, which is even scarier. Like there's all this stuff, like as far as warrants and going by the book and all that stuff, that's for people like you and I. But when it comes to governments and there's people that are above the president, because the president doesn't do shit, he's just a figurehead, we all know that. But like these people don't have any rules. They make the rules and then they find ways to kind of go around them, if not just completely break them altogether. And like, what are you gonna do about it? There's nobody to police the police. So um, it's scary. So obviously, Edward Snowden, kind of shines a light on that, lets them know that all this information on pretty much everybody around the world, they already have it. So you don't have to worry about it. Like you're already being spied on. It happens every day, and it's happened every day since, and it's even ramped up even more ever since 9/11, which was whatever people think about that, but that was an inside job, I think. But so I don't want to drag you into that's all on me, but that's just what I think. Now we've obviously had instances where we've had discussions about 9/11, and those videos are no
hmm
longer on YouTube for whatever reason. They cite things like hate speech and whatever, but those videos no longer exist. So everybody can make up their own mind about that kind of stuff. um, but yeah, so we get from his time being overseas. Obviously, in the Middle East. Obviously, he comes back. He needs to take a break, and from there, he jumps into kind of the whole race and stuff. So, what I guess does he kind of get assigned to Obama at that time? Just he just kind of gets like the short end of the stick, and he's just out there, doing reports on him or whatever. Is that kind of how that worked out?
No, I think a lot of it had to do with his treatment after the Rolling Stone piece about Stanley McChrystal. And this kind of goes into that time period you were talking about being over in Afghanistan and the weird rules of engagement and the things that were going on with that. The coin, the counter uh, insurgency uh, method that they were trying to use to secure Afghanistan by not engaging or killing people, even when you're being shot at.
Mm.
Um, so McChrystal takes over, and Hastings wants to do a profile piece on him, and it worked out well for Hastings because McChrystal kind of saw himself as like a rock star in the military. He was a very Spartan, no nonsense kind of guy, ran 7 miles every day, ate one meal a day, um, didn't need anything when it came to accommodations. It was just like a cot and the book that he was recently reading. Carried nunchucks wherever he went. Like he was just a very eccentric guy, and the troops seemed to love him, at least the guys that were around him. But then he's over in Afghanistan trying to implement this new strategy of securing the country, and it's not going well. Hastings ends up meeting him in Berlin while McChrystal is trying to keep the Allies in Afghanistan. It sounded like the French and the Germans were looking to pull out, and he was trying to reassure them that things were going in a positive direction. And it was during that time they ended up stuck at the airport. A volcano erupted, all flights were grounded. So Hastings is stuck with these guys, and they're not in a war zone, so they let loose and they had a couple beers and they're all talking shit. And it was all in their mind, it was supposed to be off the record. And
Okay.
Hastings looked at it as this is the story. And even the opening line for the article in Rolling Stone said that Stanley McChrystal was facing the real enemy, which wasn't in Afghanistan, it was the people in the White House. And
Mhm.
um, so the piece was released, and immediately McChrystal was called back to the States. Obama demanded his resignation. Um, the troops and everybody were pissed, and there's one guy in particular. Trying to remember if his name was a letter. Hastings never said who it was. He mentioned him in the operators. I don't think he mentioned him in the article. But this guy came to him and said, if you screw us on this article, we'll fucking kill you. And he kind of took it
Yeah.
as a joke. And uh, anyways, and Obama specifically said when he went to the press conference that uh, he he McChrystal resigned, and it was due to the article in Rolling Stone. He specifically stated that, and Hastings was kind of like, "Oh shit, like what, really?" And next you know, he's on CNN and Fox News, and they're all wanting to know, like, who's this guy that wrote this piece.
Yeah.
Hastings gets a book deal out of it, and he later writes The Operators. Brad Pitt writes, buys the movie rights for it. And that gets turned into War Machine on Netflix.
Mm.
Um, so Hastings definitely had like a future ahead of him, but he's also burning bridges as he goes along. After the article comes out, he's putting in requests to be put with troops in Afghanistan, and the Pentagon's denying it. Obviously, they're
Yep.
like, "Nope, no, no, you're done doing that." So he gets stuck doing all kinds of other things where he's covering the NSA leaks. He's covering operations that the There was one article he did on psyops that were being done on members of Congress through the Pentagon. That was another piece that he did. So after that article, he really got a hard on for Obama and the Obama administration, and he felt there was one point where he was talking about uh, how everybody had that hope and change sensation with
Right.
Obama, and then he ends up being worse than the previous guy. And so uh, that was very eye opening for him. And I think it, I think at that point he was very liberal beforehand, especially when he was in Iraq. And then after that, it slowly changed to I don't trust any of these assholes. And
Yeah.
you kind of saw it in a lot of the pieces that he was writing.
Yeah. Now, yeah, it's I can definitely understand that whole kind of switch. So obviously, I mentioned that we didn't really know who Obama was when he first came in. I had no idea. I mean, at that time, I wasn't really into like politics all that well, but obviously, you know who the president is, like who's running for president that year or whatever. But like, I didn't. At that time, I didn't know at all like who was running for president or anything like that. I obviously didn't know anybody like on the Republican side, but you would always just hear like Hillary Clinton, like she was supposed to be the president, and that was just it. Like everybody was just like, "Oh yeah, she's going to be the president," and whatever, blah blah. Just like she was in 2016, she was supposed to be the president, and that didn't work out either. But like, thank God. But it's all of a sudden he's in, right. So he wasn't what everybody was expecting. Everybody was expecting big things out of him. Obviously, he didn't deliver on pretty much any of it. Depending on who you talk to, and people would do all kinds of mental gymnastics to say that he was the greatest president ever and all kinds of stuff and blah blah blah, which is fine. Like people will look at it, they have their own biases and stuff like that, and they want to believe what they believe. But um, we're looking at policies here, folks, and what you've done for the country and what you're going to do for the country, blah blah. But obviously that that whole thing didn't pan out. But so we want to. So I guess we can kind of jump a little bit ahead to like, I guess the night of when kind of when everything kind of happens. So I remember reading the book, and for everybody that wants to pick up the book, let's just go ahead and let them know exactly where they can find that. Actually, can they get that on the website, or do they go through Amazon for that?
Through Amazon,
Okay,
and
so
it's
the go ahead. I'm sorry.
it's available in print and ebook format, and all my ebooks are $2.99. So I don't really
Right.
feel right charging more than that for something you don't physically have. So
Sure, sure. No, no worries. Yeah, it's a very easy read for everybody. It actually goes into a lot of detail as well. So that day that you sent it to me, I actually read through it I think it took me like a couple hours just to read through it. Obviously you can, if you're sitting there and you're reading through it straight through, you probably finish it like in an hour, so it's not like a long book or anything, but it has a lot of information in it. So you can find that book on Amazon, as well as the new book that's going to be on Amazon as well. Um, and then if you guys want to check out his work, you can go to thecollapseexperiment.com. We'll have all the links and everything down below in the show notes for everybody, so you guys can get there faster. But yeah, so we'll kind of jump ahead a little bit, obviously. So kind of take us through some of the oddities that happened that night, because I think one of like the major things that I was or like one of the main things that caught my eye when I was reading was the fact that on the night of, he had actually gone to his neighbor's house and asking if he could borrow his car. That whole thing kind of stuck out to me. So that obviously kind of, when somebody reads that at face value, you kind of think like maybe he thinks that people are tracking him in his car or they're doing something to his car. But I guess we'll kind of just start from the beginning and just kind of go over the events of that night.
okay, so the night before, the day before, he sends out an email to friends and colleagues. It was one specific email, and then it was carbon copied to a bunch of different people, and it was stating that the FBI was was interviewing people that knew him. There was a message to a couple of news agencies that he was working with to not talk to the FBI if they showed up about how they operate. And then he finished it off by saying that he was on to something big and that he needed to leave town for a little bit. Uh, Around that same time, his brother came into town, flew from New York to LA, and was staying with him, trying to convince him to go into rehab. His family believed that he was having a mental breakdown similar to one that he had at the end of high school. Uh, they thought that he was acting very paranoid. They thought it had to do with drugs, stuff that he admits that he was into uh, 10 years prior, but he was also sober. He had been sober. The only relapse that he had for a short period of time was drinking on the 2012 campaign trail, which was kind of understandable under the circumstances.
Sure.
Um, but and they didn't find any alcohol in his system after when they did the autopsy. But Yeah, so the day prior, he sends an email out to these people. He also contacted the lawyer for WikiLeaks, letting them know that he was being investigated by the FBI. He had also noticed that his car was acting funny, and he owned a Mercedes Coupe 250, which is a smaller car, but it was brand new. Uh, n- there's Nobody really knows what he did notice that there was something funny going on with his car, and nobody really knows what that was, but, the night before he died, his brother said that he went to bed just after midnight, but around 12:30 in the morning, he lived in I wouldn't say it was an apartment complex, but it was a building that was several floors.
Mm.
Um, There was the top level, which was where he was at, his neighbor below him, and then he had a studio that was below that where he did the majority of his writing when he was working on projects. So at 12:30, he knocks on his neighbor's door and says, "I need to get out of town. Can I borrow your car? Mine is acting funny. I don't trust it." And the neighbor was like, "Well, my car is acting weird too, and I don't trust anybody driving it." So it's unknown whether or not Hastings left right after that or not, but somewhere between 12:30 and 4:20 in the morning, there's a missing gap of time. We don't know what he was doing, if he was still at home, if he had left. It's just very odd that at 4:20 in the morning he's still in LA. He's just driving around town, and then he's spotted going through a red light at an intersection. And this was by a night crawler that was sitting at I believe it was a gas station or a convenience store parking lot, and the camera catches the car going through. Um, a few minutes later, the night crawler gets a call about a car accident. He goes to it, and it ends up being the same car that he had caught on camera. Of course, he doesn't know it's Michael Hastings or what the circumstances are, but the video footage is still available on YouTube, uncut, which is pretty remarkable for our time. But the car was completely burst in the flames. The flames were going 15, 20 feet up in the air. The motor was ejected from the front of the car on impact. You can still see Hastings' body slumped over in the front seat,
Yeah.
totally engulfed in flames. Uh, there was video footage later that was captured of the accident from a security camera. It's not the best footage, but the road that the accident happened on was a boulevard, and in the boulevard was a series of palm trees. I want to say there were 15, 20 feet apart. So if you're going at a high rate of speed and you just turn slightly to the left, odds are really good you're going to slam head on into one of these trees.
Mm.
And as the car is racing down the street at a high rate of speed, you see some sparks flying from underneath the car. Then there's the impact. There's a series of two explosions, one after another. Uh, it's unknown as to what caused that, why the explosion happened that way. It could have just been one thing igniting something else, like the gas tank. Um, but there was speculation that there was a car bomb. There's speculation of or a conspiracy theory. I'm just gonna say that because it obviously wasn't true that it was a drone strike.
Sure.
That was one of the theories that came out. There was a story, and all of this comes from one woman, Kimberly Dvorak. She covered the story for a bit after the accident, trying to keep it alive, but at the same time, she was just coming up with all these crazy, insane theories as to what happened, and nothing to really back them at all.
Sure.
Uh, but at one point, she tried claiming that the motor was found behind the car when obviously, when you look at the video footage, it is in front of the car, and you could tell where it traveled and how it got there. Uh, but there was some other odd things about the accident as well in the report. Like they identified him through two things: fingerprints
Hmm.
uh, from a body that was completely engulfed in flames. I didn't know how credible that was, and his medical marijuana card that was found in his wallet. So, uh,
Hmm.
you know, I haven't heard the theory yet that Hastings wasn't in the car, but I'm really
It's kind of
surprised that one didn't come out.
it's kind of one of those things about when I hear that, especially when like with the wallet thing, it reminds me of like 9/11, where the only thing they found was the hijackers' passports and like the entire wreckage, and they were still like fine. They had, like a little chart on around the edges and stuff, but they were still there. You could read all the names and see the pictures and stuff. It's like what? Come on, that's absolutely crazy. But I mean, I was looking at the videos, um, that obviously that were in the book, and like I can see like when he's kind of tearing through the intersection, it kind of looks like he ran a red light, and then I can see when police are kind of pulling up and the car's in flames. But that whole thing is like, I mean, I guess if you're speeding, if you're like really speeding and you kind of hit something and maybe it hits like the gas tank and explodes, but I mean, for the most part, car wrecks when you crash, I mean, you don't burst into flames like that. So it's kind of a weird thing. I can see why people would think like maybe there was some kind of like a charge in the car or something, or an explosion or something. Because as soon as that car crashed, like it just kind of burst into flames, which was kind of a weird thing. But yeah, it's weird. I mean, the fact that so who was Staff Sergeant Joseph Briggs to him? Was he just like a friend?
It was a guy that he had met over in Afghanistan,
Okay.
and after he had been over there several times, you meet people, you remain friend. They stayed in touch afterwards, so that was
Right.
kind of like one of his military contacts that he kept in touch with. And this was somebody that after Hastings died, went on TV. I believe the interview is still available. But he was the one saying like, "Hey, I got this email, and obviously something was going on with him. Not him in particular, but something was going on where somebody was going after Hastings, and he stated that he wanted to know what really happened to him. Um, so that was something that was brought up. Um, yeah, Briggs is one of the people that got the email. Uh, it's unclear. No one else that can think of really came out and discussed receiving the email except for the WikiLeaks lawyer. Um, and there was nobody that admitted that they were being interviewed by the FBI either. Um,
Sure.
so that kind of led to uh, the theory that Hastings was having a mental breakdown, that that was kind of made up. But then as people were investigating afterwards, it came out, yeah, they had a file on him. They were watching him. He was definitely involved in some investigating some shady stuff, and so there's two stories there, and there's evidence and credibility for both. Except I'm kind of leaning more towards something sketchy happened to him, considering he had gotten remarried. Um, he had family that cared about him. He didn't There was the thought or the idea that was put out there that he did it on purpose, that, like, this was his way of committing suicide. But then again,
Right.
like, why if that was the case, why would he send out an email warning people, like, that this was going on or that he was leaving town or, if he was on to something big, like, why would he just, like, completely ditch that and decide to do this instead? Um we'll never know, like, what was really going on in his head at the time. There
Sure.
was, an instance with him in high school, when he initially had a breakdown back then. His father was a doctor, not a psychiatrist, but a medical doctor, and they believe that Hastings was, like, was it bipolar or manic depressant? Um But he had this phase, he was really into Hunter S. Thompson, so he was doing a lot of drugs and, a lot of partying senior year, and, at one point, he stole the family car, crashed it into a tree. There's another instance where, the police were, trying to apprehend him, take him back home, and he pretended that he had a gun in his pocket, trying to get the police to shoot him. Um,
Hmm.
but this is all from the family after the fact, and it's unclear whether any of this is credible or true. I'm sure there's some truth to it if his brother was visiting him from New York, but at the same time, it's like they were also treating him like he's still that teenage kid that uh, needs to be rescued by his family, even though he's 32 years old and remarried or not remarried, uh, married with a career, doing all this stuff. And yet his brother says to the cops after the accident, like, don't be surprised if you find cocaine in his apartment. And it's like no drugs were
The
ever
heck?
found.
The heck? I come back for my brother if he says some stupid shit like that. I'm like, bro, what's going on? Like, you trying to set me up here? Like, but so like one of like the crazier things that gets me every time is whenever you hear cases like this where people end up like killing themselves or supposedly killing themselves or they end up like in accidents and stuff like that is the fact that they like advertise information that they're going to be sharing, like, oh, I got this big story that I'm going to break and just like be on the lookout for this because I've got something big. And it's the same thing that happened to like Andrew Breitbart and like
Hmm.
other people when they were just talking about like, oh, I got like this giant case on Obama and like just watch out for this stuff. It's gonna really blow the lid off of things. And it's like, bro, just keep your mouth shut, dude, and just like let us know like what's happening. Like you don't have to advertise your crap because that's when they start looking into you more. And then things like this happen, and that's where we all get this thing. Like it's like a joke, but like kind of half-heartedly, where everybody says like, "Oh, I'm not suicidal. I'm not gonna kill myself." Like that's where that whole thing comes from.
Hmm.
You're looking into shit, and then like you end up dead, and then like we never know like what's gonna happen, or we never get the information. And it's because of this stuff, and a lot of people think that it doesn't happen, but when you're dealing with like with high level people in the government, or you're trying to break stories of stuff that should never be out like in the public, there's nothing that they won't go and do to keep you from talking. Like people think like, oh, the government would never do that to us. It's just like, dude, like, are you serious? Like, you actually believe that? Like these people don't care about you. Like they don't know you. And even if they did, they would still kill their own mother, their own wives, husband, to keep like these secrets from coming out. It's just like you mean nothing to anybody. Like it's no, they're gonna come after you. And And I feel like he knew a whole lot more than he actually let on, and he just made the mistake of kind of letting everybody know, what was coming down the pipe. And he actually paid he made the ultimate sacrifice because whether they did it or not, but he actually died for it. So that's one of my pet peeves whenever I hear somebody say like, "Oh, I got this huge story coming out," just like, man, if that guy doesn't end up dead next week or something, like I'd be surprised. It's so dumb. Just keep your mouth shut.
Yeah,
Like that's it.
the list of people like that, like McAfee, he had that
Yeah.
wax tattoo on his neck, and Terrence Yeeki, that's somebody that that's how I came across your
Hmm.
podcast, was you did a
Yeah.
video on him, and uh, I've been researching that one lately. Duncan Lump, some of the stuff that he was working on, that really, um, there's only a handful of people that knew about it. But with the internet and everything these days, it's like, even I don't know if it's because he was, and this is Lemp. I don't know if it's because he was 21 and just young. He was really smart. He was really bright. He had he working on computer programming, doing all these different websites and stuff. But he was bragging about this project that he was working on. I don't know if it was bragging, but he was telling people about this project that he was working on Instagram, and there's some speculation about that as to if that had anything to do with it. But yeah, there's this long list of people, and there were several with Oklahoma City that were collecting information, and that information disappeared. Uh, 9/11. There's a there's this long list of people that just they go asking questions, and oops, had no idea they're gonna fall in front of that train and subway, or you know.
And what makes it even, I guess, funnier and worse at the same time is that another name that comes up as well with the Oklahoma City bombing is freaking Hillary Clinton. She's in the middle of that whole thing as well. She's
Mhm.
kind of associated with that whole thing, but that that whole Yiki thing was crazy. But there's actually a gentleman by the name of Craig Roberts that I've been trying to get a hold of. We spoke a while back, but he actually wrote a book um, that's called The Medusa File. This would be the second part, I think it's called,
Mhm.
the second part, The Medusa File 2, and that's the politics of terror and the Oklahoma City bombing, I think is what it's called. But he goes into like deep into what happened prior to the bombing and why the bombing happened, and like how Hillary's kind of involved as well, and then that officer Yiki as well. Now, Mr. Roberts is the officer who was assigned. He was I think he was a Tulsa, Oklahoma police officer at the time
Mhm.
when that happened, and he got reassigned to the Oklahoma City bombing. And he was like working the whole case and stuff like that. So we had plans to get together a while back, but he had to reschedule, and then like now he's having some issues with his internet. He had to get everything redone. So we're still waiting for that whole thing to kind of play out. But that's going to be coming down the pipe hopefully soon. So um, I'll have to put you in touch so that way I'm sure he'd be willing to share whatever kind of information he has. So I'll go ahead and reach
Yeah,
out just to see if he's okay with that.
I was trying to find a way to contact him. I found a couple email addresses, but I don't know if they're like still legit or not. And there was an address and another article, and I don't know. It was
Yeah,
I was reaching a lot of dead ends on that. So
yeah, no, yeah. He's in there. I think we spoke about last week. I think we're trying to figure out when he's free and stuff. He's extremely busy for. I mean, he's retired, but he used to be in the military as well, so he's got a whole
mhm.
lot of stuff going on. So it's kind of a weird thing, but we're gonna track him down eventually and hopefully set it up. So we'll we'll get that like, in the works for everybody else as well. But yeah, so I guess kind of like as we wind down here, I guess kind of let everybody else know where they can find the rest of your work, because I know you have a website and you have a lot of articles and stuff that you go through in there as well. But just kind of where they can find the website and like any other social media they can find you on, as well as they can get the books.
Yeah, all my books are available on Amazon, ebook and print format. I try to keep the ebooks as cheap as possible. Um, and yeah, I've got the collapseexperiment.com. That's my website where I'm constantly sharing articles as to where we're at in the collapse that we're experiencing. It's kind of
Yep.
the theme of the website. And I don't know, the last 2 years, if you don't think things aren't falling apart, I don't know what rock you've been living under. But um, yeah, the collapseexperiment.com. I also have the Collapse Experiment podcast. I try to at least record on that every other day, if not every day during the week when I can. Currently, I'm working on reading through The Great Narrative, which is the sequel to COVID-19, The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab.
Mm.
This one is like where they're trying to create the great narrative for taking us into the future. And yeah, some of the stuff that they say in there and the arguments that they try to make, and they seem to be way off in a lot of things. So
Yeah.
it's me reading, and then I'll read something where I'm just like, where the hell did they get this? And I'll go on some rant, and it's I try to make reading this book as entertaining as possible, and it's tough work. It's
Oh
very
yeah.
dry.
I bet it's weird. It's a lot of stuff that it's kind of weird though, obviously. So I mean, they put all this information out there, and then they could, they kind of give everybody the game plan before they actually implement anything. But it's like a lot of people that don't believe that like we're actually being taken down on purpose from within. Like, it's hard to like make people see, uh, especially when they vote for Biden. But okay, just kidding. But it's like people that voted for Biden just kind of like put their head in the sand, and it's just like nothing's happening. It's just like, oh, he's the greatest president we've had, and like the most votes in
Uh,
history, and all. It's just like, bro, come on, man. Like if you don't see what's going on right now, like I can't help you. When shit hits the fan and we're scrounging for food and dumpsters and stuff, I'll be coming for you. I'm gonna take your portions. That's what's gonna happen. But it's just crazy. It's a lot of weird things that are going on, and it's not by accident. It's all deliberate. I feel, but
yeah,
it's weird.
I try to stay positive. Like the news today, Tulsi Gabbard leaving the Democratic Party, and I'm like, okay, there's definitely some eyes opening here, and people are
Sure.
seeing some things. But I'm also really surprised that she didn't do that 2 years ago when they like totally screwed her out of the election. And but
Well,
yeah,
she
things like that
lost.
keep me hopeful. But
It's kind of weird. Kamala Harris lost to her like in the debate, like early on. She lost to her like completely. There was no like comparison. Like right now, it should be Tulsi Gabbard. It should be either president. Like I would have voted for her, even though
mhm.
I'm not a Democrat. But I would have voted for her. I would have even wanted her as the vice president. She would have been amazing. Obviously, they would have freaking clipped her wings, and they wouldn't have let her do a lot of stuff that she would want to do. But um, that she's like one woman that I could get behind when it comes to having the first female president. Like she would be the one. Obviously, she has like a lot of her own stuff that I don't agree with. She's kind of a war hawk as well, but we can kind of get past that. We've been in like in wars for the last 40 years. Like there was like a little gap in between Vietnam and that, but even besides that, we were like right back into another war. But um, so there's obviously a little things here and there, obviously that comes with every candidate. But um, she would have been like my first pick as far as like the first woman president. But I don't think it's going to do much. She left the Democratic Party, and they're all just like, all right, we'll see you later. Like it's not going to change much. Like
No.
I get what she's trying to do, and like what she wants to do, but it's not going to make a difference. That I guarantee you tomorrow, all you're going to hear about her is that she's racist and that she's this and that, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. Like, it's just going to go away. So that sucks, but that's where we are right now. I wish I could. I always make the joke that when I die, like I never want to come back to this plane of existence ever again. Like I want to go somewhere else. Like maybe find like another galaxy somewhere and we'll be good. I don't want to come back here anymore. Screw this place, man. It's ridiculous, everybody nowadays, but whatever. But yeah, so for everybody that's watching right now, we'll have all the links to the website and the podcast as well down below in the show notes for everybody, as well as the links to the books. We'll have everything down below. I'll also have the links to the YouTube videos for the crash as well that we're talking about. There's 2 links in there. The one from the Nightcrawler that you mentioned and the one from the accident as well. You guys will let me know when you see the video if you think it was like an actual legit explosion when the car was crashing, or if there was some other kind of funny business. But you guys know where to hit me up with emails, or you can just shoot me some comments in the comment section as well. But Matt, I really appreciate it, sir. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to stop in with us. And it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed the book. I read it, like I mentioned, I think it took me like 2 hours to get through it. So it was a good one. We'll be looking forward to the next one as well. Hopefully we can have you back on in the future for that one as well.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
No, yeah, absolutely. We really appreciate it. For everybody else, we really appreciate you guys stopping in. Like I mentioned before, we will be going fast and furious over the next couple of weeks. Tuesday, we have Preston Dennett coming back on. He has a new book. It's called Symmetry, so we'll be checking that out. And then next Wednesday, we'll be having Charlie Robinson back on the 19th. We're going to be kind of discussing more as to the whole shit show that we are in currently and how fast it's going to take us to get to the bottom of the barrel. It's going to be coming up pretty quick, so everybody be checking out for that. And then we'll be also having Mr. Jason McLean as well from Texas Front Porch, who's a good friend of the show. We'll be having him on as well, I think on the 20th. I think we're going to kind of nail that down, but I have to speak with him again. But yeah, guys, I really appreciate you guys stopping in. Like I mentioned before, if you guys aren't already a subscriber, please consider hitting that subscribe button and giving us a thumbs up. That'll really help us out with the algorithms, as well as clicking that bell icon so you guys don't miss an episode in the future, whether we go live or we post, some other kind of videos as well. If you guys are wanting to check us out and you guys are on the go, you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio and Amazon Music at Truth Defender Podcast. If you guys want to shoot a question over to us, questions for myself or our guests, or guest or topic recommendations, you can email us at thetruthDefender1776@gmail.com. Everybody take it easy. Have a great weekend. We'll catch you guys on Tuesday. Everybody stay blessed, but most of all, stay frosty.